A very warm welcome to you all. It's really lovely to see you, and welcome to the fourth of our series of 5 talks on big questions and big answers. Our title today, as you can see, is Are there any arguments for the existence of God? Which I thought was a good question for us to consider, because we're always told, aren't we, why do you believe this stuff? It's all been disproved. It's all a load of nonsense. And so I thought it would be good to do one talk on this topic to give us some logical arguments in favour of belief in God. And that's what I'm trying to do today. So I'm going to start with a guy called Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas lived 1224 to 1274, in case you're interested. He was a Dominican priest, a theologian, a philosopher. He was considered one of the greatest Christian philosophers, I think, of all time. And he wrote a number of works looking at various big questions. And in one document he wrote called Summa Theologiae, great name, don't you think? He put forward 5 proofs or 5 ways that argue for the existence of God. And we're going to look at 3 of those ways today and then look at something else as well. And these are propositions that he makes where he proposes that in fact there are logical arguments for us to consider that support belief in God. And that's why I thought these were worth us considering and reflecting upon. So let's start with the first. His first way, or his first argument, or to put it in more contemporary language, his first logical argument for the existence of God is the argument from motion. Aquinas looked at the world and he concluded that by common observation, an object will only move if something moves it. That's fairly obvious, isn't it? So this table will move if I kick it, but if nothing makes it move, it will not move. That's a fairly obvious thing that we understand, isn't it? So nothing will move without something moving it. Now that's just logic that we see in everyday life. A stone only moves because some force has caused it to move. So, said Aquinas, if you go back in time to the first thing that ever moved, then that something must have been moved by something or someone. Something must have caused that movement. And I think surely he was right, because the laws of physics that apply today applied 15 billion years ago if we go back to the Big Bang. Obviously he didn't talk about the Big Bang, but I'm just applying his thinking to what we know about today. And so Aquinas basically believed that there must be something that had caused that first movement. And he called this the unmoved mover, talking about God, the unmoved mover. And basically he was proposing that something or someone outside of this physical universe must have put things into motion, must have moved the first thing. So I thought I'd show you a little video about things moving, which I quite like, and I hope it's of interest to you. This is an ad for a car, believe it or not.
isn't it nice when things just work?
It's a clever advert, isn't it? I love it. I love it. But it sort of makes the point of everything that happens there, something caused it to happen, didn't it? And so I thought it was a good little advert, which I enjoyed, but it makes the point that things do not move by themselves. I just do wonder how many times they had to try all those things to make it work. But anyway, super, super advert. But the point Aquinas was making is that things do not move by themselves. Something has to cause them to move. And if every object in motion had a mover, then the first object in motion also needed a mover. This first mover is the unmoved mover. That's what Aquinas called it, talking about God, of course. So that unmoved mover must be God. But that's, you get the point. But I thought that was a great little video, and it sort of illustrates the point from his argument from motion. Things only move if something moves them. The first thing to move must have had a mover. And that the only thing logical conclusion of that is an unmoved mover, to use his terminology, therefore God. That's his first argument anyway. His second way, or his second argument, is a very similar sort of logic, but it's applied to existence rather to movement. And again, so it's the argument from existence. And it's actually sort of like the chicken and the egg debate. An egg only appears if a chicken lays it, but where did that chicken come from? Of course, we all know that's a slightly silly debate. But similarly, a planet only comes into existence if forces move the matter that was floating in space and gravity causes it to coalesce, surely. There is always something that causes a thing to appear. A baby doesn't just appear, something causes that baby to appear. Some force or some power or some living thing is behind the appearance of every single thing that appears. This table did not just appear. Somebody smelted the ore, made the metal, carved the wood, cut it up, fabricated it together and made the table. It doesn't just appear. There is always something or someone that has caused it to appear. And so Aquinas, again, just using, in a sense, common sense and observation, tells us that no object creates itself and no object just appears out of nothing. There is always something that has caused that object to come into existence. So some previous thing had to create it. Well, that's all very well until we look back again to the beginning of the universe. And then what was it that created the first thing? The Big Bang. Let's talk about the Big Bang. What caused that first Big Bang? What caused it to happen? Aquinas believed that ultimately there must be what he called, similar terminology again, an uncaused first cause. This is how he described God, just using this terminology, who began the chain of existence of all things. Or to use modern language, there must be something or someone that exists outside this physical universe that caused the first thing in this universe to come into existence. Because we know that in this physical universe, nothing comes into being without something causing it. That's just logic, isn't it? And again, the laws of physics that exist today have always existed. So, again, to just follow the steps of his argument, things that exist are caused to exist or created by other things. Nothing can be the cause of itself. Nothing can exist unless some other thing has caused it to exist. There was a beginning. Interesting that that's really come back, of course, with belief now in the Big Bang. Therefore, the first thing to exist in this universe must have had something or someone to cause it to come into existence, something or someone outside this universe. Therefore, there must be an uncaused first cause, and that is God. Lots of jargon in there, but you get the point, I think. Another video about causes and beginnings. Another advert, actually. I probably watch too much TV.
Of life is is a powerful beat. Puts a tingle in your fingers and a tingle in your feet. Rhythm in your bedroom, rhythm in the street. Yes, the rhythm of life is a powerful beat. And the rhythm of life is a powerful beat. Puts a tingle in your fingers and a tingle in your feet. Rhythm in your bedroom, rhythm in the street. Yes, the rhythm of life is a powerful beat. Flip your wings and fly to your daddy. Take a dive and swim to your daddy. Hit the floor and rock to your daddy. Daddy, reach out the rhythm of life, of life, of life, of life.
It's another great little advert, isn't it? You've got to be honest. Obviously, as I say, I watch too much TV. But the point about that is that everything that exists was caused by something. And of course, that first cause, I would suggest, and Aquinas suggested, was, of course, God. Now, his third and fourth arguments, I think, are just really restatements in various ways of his first and second. Forgive me if you know about Aquinas and disagree. So I thought we'd go on to his fifth way, or his fifth argument for a logical explanation of why we can believe that there is a God, and that is what is called, nowadays is called intelligent design. It was an argument from design. And he believed again that this logically supports the belief in God. And it has to do with the observable universe and how when we look at the universe, how perfectly and wonderfully things fit together. The human body, but not even beyond that, ecosystems, the whole universe, solar systems. There are so many systems, weather systems, where there are so many things that fit together beautifully and amazingly that it gives the impression, again, by the way, none of these things prove the existence of God. They are just giving us, saying that we can have logical arguments for the existence of God. I should have said that at the beginning. But again, Aquinas, starting with common sense, tells us that the universe works in an organized and planned way. And the logical conclusion of that is that somebody has planned for that to happen. And I think that there is a reasonable argument for that. And I thought, again...
So what is intelligent design and why is it important? Intelligent design is basically a way of looking at nature where we look for signs of intelligence. So rather than beginning with Scripture and assuming the earth is old or young, intelligent design proponents look at things like DNA, or they look at things like the fine-tuning of the universe and simply say, can naturalistic causes explain this phenomena? Or is there some reason to think that there's a mind behind this effect that we see? I think a powerful case can be made from the information we see in DNA that there's an author of life. From the fine-tuning of the laws of physics, there's a fine-tuner. So intelligent design is simply a way of looking at the world and asking what can natural causes account for, and we see that it's limited, and are there signs of intelligence in the natural world? Now, as Christians, this is powerful because we believe that God is the creator of the world and he's made himself known. Psalms 19:1 and 2 says the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim his majesty. Day by day they spew forth speech, and night by night they display knowledge. David wrote that roughly 3,000 years ago, long before any awareness of modern science. And in many ways, modern science is beginning to catch up with what David wrote, that we see signs of intelligence from the smallest cell to the larger structures of the universe.
So intelligence design, also called the teleological argument, is the argument that when you look at the universe, there is evidence of design and of God's handiwork in it. When we look at its beauty, its intricate detail, its organization, and the intricate synchronicity of various systems in the natural world, we get a sense that somebody's behind this. I love Psalm 19, which he quoted there, by the way, which the first half of it is really, as he described, the second half, by the way, is all about God's word, a great psalm. But for many centuries, this was how everybody thought, that when you look at the world, you see evidence of God's craftsmanship within it. And I think it's not an illogical argument. Again, to be quite clear, it's not proof, but it is a logical argument. And I thought we'd turn to this and consider a man called William Paley, who was a big advocate in the 18th century of this belief in intelligent design. He suggested that as we look at nature, we can see evidence of a designer. He was a natural scientist, he was the theologian, and as he looked at the world around him, he said, surely there is somebody behind what we see here. And famously, Paley used the illustration of a mechanical watch. Watches nowadays are very different, aren't they? Mine's, I don't know how the heck it works, but it used to be that you could open a watch and see the cogs and the springs and the bits inside of it. And certainly Paley could. And he used this as an analogy of the created world. He pointed out that the way in which all the parts of a watch work together to meet a purpose suggests that the watch must have had a design, and of course this is right. This is because the order and purpose couldn't reasonably be explained as the result of chance. And he made the point that if somebody found a mechanical watch lying on a beach somewhere and said, look at this, just by chance all these bits have come and have fit together, then we would look at them and sort of just laugh at them, wouldn't we? We'd say, don't be ridiculous. Of course those things didn't just by chance. No matter how many millions or billions of years you might think come together, somebody planned it, designed it, crafted the parts and put it together. And Paley's argument was that the same is true of the world. It's not logical, he said, to believe that it all came together by chance, but rather it is evidence of a great intelligence that planned it and designed it. And he suggested that when you look at, for example, the world or the human body or the systems that we see in the world, these are ways in which nature speaks to us of a designer and of a purpose in how things are put together. So that was the argument of William Paley. And something that has come up in more modern times, which sort of supports this, is has come really as scientists have looked at the Big Bang and at the creation of the world. And it's quite interesting, because scientists who have investigated the Big Bang have discovered that the universe that we have has many surprising qualities that one would not expect to happen, and that they have to be so precisely tuned that if there is a slightest little change to them, that the universe that we currently see could not exist. And this is called the what's called the Goldilocks dilemma. That everything, not everything, but many things in the universe seem to be just right to produce a universe that can support life. And it's quite interesting to see them. And with these various things, if just a single variable were even slightly off, then we could not, and the universe as we understand it, could not exist. Indeed, it soon became clear, for example, that the exact strength of gravity had to be very specific, that the strength of the strong and weak nuclear forces had to be very specific, and these were critical for the existence of a universe that could create planets and stars and therefore be able to support life. Indeed, the fundamental constants of nature, many of them seem to be fixed at certain very specific and it seems unlikely values. Indeed, a non-Christian scientist, the astronomer Fred Hoyle, who I mentioned in the first talk on science, who was originally against Big Bang. You may remember I talked about this. He was against the Big Bang theory because it gave the possibility of a creation. But he described these strange variables like this. He suggested that, and I quote, a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology. And that's from a non-Christian scientist talking there. So it's quite interesting, this Goldilocks dilemma, which is that many key facets of the universe seem to have been designed to enable life to develop. So I thought we'd look at a few of these together, just so you understand what I'm talking about. Here's one. Atoms. Protons are, or just happen to be, 1,836 times larger than electrons. Who knew? But if they were a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, then atoms would not be able to form molecules, and then the universe as we have it currently would not exist. Just one example of a very precise measurement that had to exist for the universe to be the universe that we know. Here's another one, water. We know about water. Every life form depends, of course, on water, but thankfully, unlike any other substance known to man, water's solid form, i.e. ice, is less dense than its liquid form. This causes ice to float, and if ice did not float, then our planet would experience runaway freezing. Again, a short video just to make that point. This is a TV science show.
So this isn't something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, but the fact that ice floats on liquid water is really weird and really important. And not just because it lets your iced tea make that nice tinkling sound, but because most aquatic organisms depend on it. If ice didn't float, then rivers and lakes would freeze from the bottom up instead of freezing on their surfaces, and all the living things in them would be exposed to cold from both the ice below and the frigid air above. Most living things wouldn't be able to survive a single winter of this. But fortunately, ice does float, so it creates an insulating layer between the cold air and the water, allowing organisms to survive and swim all winter long. Okay, but so why does ice do that? First, we need to know why anything floats or sinks, and the answer to that is simply density. If a material is more dense than the fluid that surrounds it, it'll sink. If it's less dense, it'll float. So in short, the answer is that ice floats because frozen water is less dense than liquid water. But how is that possible? Isn't it all just water, and aren't solids, like, definitionally more dense than liquids? Well, not definitionally. Usually, yes. But water molecules are special in the way that they're shaped and how their electrons are distributed around them. So we all know that water is composed of 2 hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom, but you might not know that oxygen attracts electrons more strongly than hydrogen does. The result is that the electrons in a water molecule hang out closer to the oxygen than the hydrogens, and this gives the O side of the molecule a slightly negative charge, while the H2 side has a slightly positive charge. This makes water a polar molecule, and a lot of water's coolest and most useful properties come from this polarity. So when water is in its liquid phase, its molecules, like in all liquids, are randomly organized. But as the water cools, the molecules get closer together, and at a certain point, starting around 4 degrees Celsius, they get close enough together that the positive and negative areas of those molecules start attracting each other, and they snap into a rigid structure. And because water molecules are bent at an angle, when they line up like this, the structure they form leaves little holes between them, which makes the structure less dense. Those tiny holes are the entire reason that solid water floats on top of its liquid form. So remember that next time you skate on a frozen pond or enjoy a nice icy bevy. Thanks for asking, and thanks especially to our subbable subscribers who keep these answers.
I just think that's great and really cool, actually, that all these tiny little things make water a very special molecule and mean that ice floats, which is absolutely vital for the survival of species throughout the history of this planet. Quite astonishing, isn't it? Here's another thing, a Goldilocks fact, the Earth's magnetic field, which of course we can't see, but it is there. But apparently if it were weaker, our planet would be devastated by cosmic radiation. If it were a little bit stronger, we would be devastated by electromagnetic storms. But it is just right. It seems to have been designed to protect us and to make this planet habitable. Another example of these things is the expansion rate of the Big Bang. So since the Big Bang, roughly 50 billion years ago, the universe has been expanding. If the expansion rate were slightly higher, then the universe would expand too fast, and it would not therefore have created mass together, would not have created planets or solar systems. If it was a little bit lower, the expansion rate, then the gravity would have been too strong, and it would have just condensed the whole universe into a massive black hole. But it is, again, just right. Isn't it fascinating? Okay, here's another one. I love this. I had to type this very carefully. This is the density of the universe, okay? Apparently the density of the universe has to be very specific in order for it to be able to, again, create matter and create planets and stars and so forth. And a variation of just 0.000, that's 12 noughts, 0.00000000001% would just that tiny little change would mean that galaxies and stars could not exist. But isn't that fascinating? That tiny little change. Amazing. So the Goldilocks dilemma is that there are various facets, and these aren't all of them, I've just given you some examples of how the universe is made that have to be exactly right for us to have the universe that we have. And it seems that it has been designed and planned to make a universe that could produce planets and stars and so forth, and produce a world that is habitable and, of course, upon which we live. Just one last little video that I thought you might like.
Did you know that if gravity were slightly more powerful, the universe would collapse into a ball?
I did not.
Also, if gravity were slightly less powerful, the universe would fly apart and there'd be no stars or planets.
Where are you going with this, Sheldon?
It's just that gravity is precisely as strong as it needs to be. And if the ratio of the electromagnetic force to the strong force wasn't 1%, life wouldn't exist. What are the odds that would happen all by itself?
Why are you trying to convince me to believe in God? You don't believe in God.
I don't, but the precision of the universe at least makes it logical to conclude there's a creator.
Great little clip, isn't it? And I just thought it makes the point that I am trying to make today. Dear friends, we are always told that science disproves Christianity. And of course, there are many things in science that are challenging. I don't deny that. But what I hope we have seen this evening is that that is not necessarily true. That some science supports our faith, and that there are some logical reasons for us to have a belief in God. And so I pray for each of you tonight that you'll be encouraged, that you will have faith, and that you will give glory to God, because I think that's what we should do. So thank you very much, and that is the end of this evening's talk. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to make? And I'll do my best to answer them, but it will just be doing my best. Anyway, any comments or questions from anybody? Jonathan, sorry.
We were sort of edging towards the sort of scientific basis for belief in some of those contributions. Do we have probability scores in terms of what did you say it was 12 noughts and a 1%?
That was about the density of the universe, and if it was just that 12 noughts and 1%, so that's 0.1% difference, then the universe would not be able to create galaxies or stars or planets. So it's very finely tuned. But it's so I think there were I think the people would have looked at this and said it's very improbable. But I just want to be completely honest. None of this proves the existence of God. I'm not trying to say that. But I'm trying to say that as believers, I think we can say we have logical reasons for what we believe. And I think that's something for us to hold on to and to say hallelujah to.
Not having read Aquinas, did he have an alternative explanation?
No, he didn't. It's not that I've read.
Does anybody else? Bearing in mind those probabilities of it, of there not being an overall creator.
What Aquinas was doing was looking at the universe and saying, the first thing that moved, how did that happen? So it's not really quite a probability. He's raising a logic question. If things only move, coming to his first cause, because something has moved them, you keep going back in time, get to the beginning, whenever the beginning was. What caused that first thing to move? That's his question. So it's not so much a probability question, but it's a logic question. How did that first thing move? There must be an unmoved mover which he describes is how he describes God. Does that make sense? So it's not so much about probability for him as about logic.
Okay.
Yeah.
By extension, do we know today anybody who has a credible explanation for there not being a creator, and yet we witness the world we live in, the universe we live in?
Well, I have to be honest with you, Jonathan. There are many scientists and many intelligent people who would say absolutely there is not a creator and there is not a God. And I think we as Christians need to respect that position.
What is their logic?
Their logic is not so much coming back to the equality. I think that the beginning of the Big Bang is a question, isn't it? How does nothing explode and create everything is a very tough question, okay, isn't it? But of course, scientists are trying to answer that, and maybe one day they'll come up with an answer to it. But I think we have to acknowledge that science, and you know from this talk and my first talk, I think science is wonderful. And I think we should rejoice in it. And when I read of spacecraft going to the end of the solar system and comets going around and people investigating the Big Bang, I think that's fantastic. You know, I had my friend Richard here at the first talk, who is a professor of cells, in fact, a nuclear the structure of atoms, sorry, not cells. But so I think we need to, I don't think it's about saying that I don't think we don't want to say, I'm not trying to say this in any triumphalist way. I'm trying to say it in an encouraging way. As people of faith, yes, there are things that are challenging for us, yeah, but there are also things that support the proposition or the possibility that there is a God. That's all I'm saying. And I think that's something I hope that strengthens and encourages us and should do so. Because I think we hear so much stuff where people say, oh, you're stupid for believing. I'm just trying to put the other side of the coin. I'm not trying to say I disprove the anti-Christian side. I'm just trying to say that there is another side of the coin, and I think it's good for us to hear that as well. Yeah?
There seems to be an argument that suggests the logic argument supporting faith derives from the probability argument.
I don't quite get the probability thing, so maybe I'm missing that. But I do get Aquinas' logic thing, that something must have caused the first thing to come into existence, something must have caused the first thing to move. So I get that. I'm going to go to Jeremy now, but you're welcome to ask more questions first, but just to make sure that other people can. Jeremy.
Some observations. There's a fellow, I think, called Dawkins,
yes,
who wrote a book called The God Delusion.
That's right.
I'll come back to that one, but he wrote another book that shows the progression of life from the single cell right to the human, which he's the master of that sort of knowledge. In The God Delusion, he does actually say there is something beyond my understanding which created, and I don't understand how it happened.
Yeah.
He admits that there is something there, but what he's really against is the interpretation of Christianity, perhaps by some of the particular Americans, which is another story. The second point is that...
So just to answer, I think all scientists will admit that there are things that they don't know, because that is what science is. Science is looking at the evidence and growing in your knowledge, isn't it? But yes.
Yeah, but it's nice to find a person and writing it down in his book,
yes,
which is an anti-book,
yeah,
but then he has to say that, because he's fair. Secondly, it used to be a time long ago when I used to have to take assemblies in schools. And because I like puppets and things like that, and we had this rather big range of ages. So I used to tell simple stories that they knew, including Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And you tell the first part of the story, and you see all the boys in the back saying, isn't this awful? And all the ones in the front, the little ones, really enjoying it. And then I'd take Too Hot, Too Cold to Just Right and move it on to the science aspects. And all the boys would suddenly sit up and take notice and really get involved. And the reports back from the school afterwards was how they all discussed this and how popular this had been. These ideas you can float from simple things you learn in childhood actually have a greater meaning.
Yeah. Well, I think Aquinas was, in a way, asking quite simple questions, but quite profound questions, wasn't he? You know, and I think that they hold firm, I think, as valid questions today. Alex?
There are some people out there that say, I know God exists because I have met him.
Yeah.
You know, they've had near-death experiences.
We talked a bit about that last
Oh, did you?
session,
I
you
missed the last two. So, well, maybe you've covered this.
No, please carry on. It's good to talk.
But I suppose, you know, if they were sitting here tonight, they would say, you know, this is all well and good, but actually I know he exists because I nearly died and I met him. Have any of those, has anyone ever kind of looked at those experiences and kind of collated them? Someone else might know this.
John Berg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jonathan, I know, looked at that quite a lot. But I think the point you make is great. You're absolutely. To be honest with that, I would say I know God exists. I would say I have met with God, and I don't think anything in the world could make me have any doubt about
and
that.
I think that's much more compelling for someone like me. I think that's much more compelling to hear those kind of like those stories.
Yes.
And because the science is, yes, it's good, but it's like I want to know what people experienced, you know.
But I think we need both. And I think some people have got these questions. And I do think the reason I've done this, because I think a lot of us as Christians have had a lot of people saying, oh, you're stupid for believing it's all been disproved. And so what I'm trying to do is to equip you, if this is helpful to you, so you can say, actually, I'm not stupid. You know? Yeah, there were questions, but I'm not stupid.
And final thing is when we had a lecture on science when I was training, and I don't remember much of the lecture, I'm sorry, but one thing I do remember the scientists saying is that science can't disprove the existence of God. Yeah. Which I think is quite
absolutely
important to know that the science can't disprove God. So.
And for those of you who weren't here for the first week, my friend Professor Richard Thompson, who came here for that talk on science and Christianity, is a devout Christian and yet a very serious and capable scientist. And there are those, you know, I'm not. I did A-level physics. That's as far as my science went. But anyway, so I think you're absolutely right. There is that. I suppose I address things like that when we do the Alpha course and things like that. I'm just trying to address different questions today in the hope, I pray, of helping people. Chris?
It's just two random comments. To me, the essence of faith does not require evidence, because that is faith. You have faith irrespective of what anybody might say or whatever the evidence is. Yeah. That is faith and belief. So although I recognise that it's necessary to address the questions, that's where I would stand on that. The only other thing I would say is, when you were talking about nature, that of course is, there are people whom I suppose would query whether that means God and a creator, because you could take the sort of, I don't know what they call it, that business, the belief in nature being the ultimate thing. Now, you could say, well, that's the same thing, and it's just a question of how you come at it and how you phrase it. And of course, the trouble is, as soon as you introduce God and Christianity, you then bring in the church, and that is not necessarily a good place to be. That's all.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right. Faith is, obviously, I'm a person of faith. You know that. I'm a vicar here. If I didn't have faith, I'd be in the wrong job, wouldn't I? But I still think that there are things I hope that can strengthen our faith, and that's what I hope today does. But you're absolutely right. Most, I think, I don't know the numbers now, but I'd imagine that most evolutionary scientists would say that the systems and the way that the structures and the patterns that we see in the universe evolved without the input of God. So I think we have to accept that. But nevertheless, I think we can say that whilst that's, of course, there are people who believe that and we respect them and love them as we must, I think it's also logical to believe that they are evidence of a designer. And it's just, yeah. So that's my sort of thinking about that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And faith, absolutely. I forget which one of you, I think it was Alex said that we cannot disprove God, but neither can we prove God. So absolutely there is a need for faith. But for me, my faith is strengthened by the experiences I've had of God, the times I've seen God work in my life, the times I've seen God answer prayer, and by some of the logical arguments that help me, but absolutely, as Alex said, by the testimony of people of faith who encourage and strengthen our faith. And that's why I go to various things, conferences or whatever, that will help me to grow in faith, because, it's a wonderful thing to have our faith strengthened and encouraged, isn't it? So yeah, wonderful. Any other questions or comments that people would like to make? I'm very happy for any. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that, don't know how to put it, people could say, yes, there is God, and he brought into existence the world, the universe, but who brought him into existence?
Well, absolutely. That is a common criticism, isn't it? I think, which is why I've tried to phrase it, that, and that's, by the way, that's my interpretation of Paley's stuff, of Aquinas' stuff, that if there is a unmoved first mover, to use his terminology, then that unmoved first mover must be outside this universe. Aquinas didn't actually say that. That's my addition to what Aquinas says. The same with the uncreated first creator, But the only logic of that is if that unmoved first mover is outside of this physical universe. And of course, I think that's certainly what I believe. I don't believe that God is in the same time as us. I don't think he's limited by time, or that you could travel across the whole universe. If one could do so, you wouldn't find God, because God, I think, is in a dimension all of his own, if that's the right terminology. So yes, but you're right. None of this is proof. I'm not trying to say I'm proving the existence of God. I'm just trying to help us to see that there are logically arguments that we can hold on to that I think can help us, because there's a lot of stuff that in media and social media will say, oh, you're stupid to believe, isn't there? There's a lot of stuff. And so I think it's good for us to have stuff that says, well, actually, it's not quite so stupid after all. And that's my aim, I think, for today. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. I do hope you're finding these talks useful. We've got one left next a week today, which is looking at, is there an answer to the evil and the wickedness that we see in the world? Because that's a challenge, isn't it? My goodness, we turn on the news and see what's going on. So we'll talk about that. A nice cheerful topic to end on. Don't forget that you can watch all these videos on the Avon Valley Church's YouTube page, and there are links to them on the Avon Valley Church's Facebook page. 2 of them are already up. The 3rd one will be up by this weekend. This one will be up probably in a week or so, I would say. Would that be right? So forgive us a little bit of a delay. Jamie does a fabulous job, and I'm really grateful to him for doing it. And it just means that they're available for you to look at any time you like, or to share with somebody. If somebody says, oh, it's a load of rubbish, Christianity, you can say, well, I've got a video for you to watch. They might or might not watch it, but they might. So I pray that it is a help to you and to others. So thank you so much for coming. Vicky, I can hear, is putting the kettle on. There's tea, coffee, red and white wine, and a chance to chat. So please stay as long as you'd like to. If you have to go, God bless you. I'm really grateful to you for being here tonight. And thank you.